Hello, SEC football fans. Allie Peak, TJ Pittinger. It's February. It's very, very much the off season of college football. I am already feeling it. I know we have the NFL still going on. We've got the Super Bowl next week, but we're literally 1 week away from really no football on our TV for what feels like a very long amount of time.
What do you do? Like, what do you consume the most besides seltzers? But like, what TV do you consume the most? Like, is it another sport? Obviously, Gators basketball is really good right now. Do you
Yeah.
catch up on shows? Do you let the
Yeah, I
kids
feel like we
pick? Like, what
catch
do
up
you
on
do?
shows mostly. I mean, we're big Florida gymnastics fans. So my daughters are competitive gymnasts, so we definitely watch a lot of gymnastics, college gymnastics. I'll get into college baseball, at least a game a week. Once that season kicks off. Obviously, we'll have March Madness here and not too long. So there'll be a lot of good basketball to watch. But I feel like in general, we catch up on TV shows. Like Eric and I watch football at least Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of every single week. Sometimes we get lucky and there's, even additional. I guess we have Monday too, but sometimes we get lucky and there's a Tuesday, Wednesday game. So like there's a lot of shows on Netflix that kind of get punted to the back burner, no pun intended,
Very well
until
done.
the off season. So
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, when baseball and softball start, obviously both of our program, Florida State and Florida both really good. And so like usually Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'll watch that.
yeah,
Like whatever baseball and softball is on. So that kind of scratches the edge.
yeah,
Basketball's terrible at Florida State, so like who cares? But I will watch all the March Madness stuff. So
yeah,
like that's fun for a
yeah.
month. All right, cool. Let's get into stuff. I was just curious how you killed your time.
Lots of other trash television essentially. But also it's gymnastics season, which means I'm traveling like every single week for something. So that fills lots and lots of time. But all right, so on three, and I believe Ari Weisserman said it on a show on three, or was it Andy Staples that said it? I think it was Ari. That talked about his top 10 returning players for 2025. I sent you a picture of this, so you should have it too. I kind of want to go down this list and let's talk about this a little bit, and you can tell me what you think. Should we start at 10 and work our way to one? I feel like that makes
Either
a
way
little
is fine with
sense.
me.
Okay,
I want to focus on one specifically, but
I
not
know
number
which
one
one you want
specifically.
to. I know who you
But I
want
mean, that's what I think is most interesting here. But yeah, like we can go through it. Yeah. So Sam Levitt at number 10, Arizona
to.
State. I like that. I think that's cool.
I don't mind that. Yeah, I mean, you're talking
I
about
don't.
playoff team, returning quarterback, plays in a conference where he absolutely has the ability to have tons of success.
So he's the third quarterback on here.
Mhm.
And just being fair, I'm going to have this complaint in a little bit. I don't think he's the third best quarterback in college football. I think I'd put him behind Drew Allar. I think I'd put him behind Cade Klubnik. I might have him I think I'd certainly have him well within the top 10. And I
Yeah,
could see arguments over some other guys. He might be around 5-ish to me. I think it's a little high,
I
but
would
I
love
do
to have
really like
picked
Sam Levitt. I'm not trying to hate on it.
Ari's brain though as to how he came up on the top. Like, are you talking top 10 returning players in a vacuum? Just the top 10 players, you got a skills contest lined up. These are the top 10 best performers. Or are you talking about the top 10 best players based on the system they're going to be playing in, the other players around them? Like, there's definitely different ways to look at this to determine. And you've got to think like, so if you're not looking at it in a vacuum, I'm looking at Levitt as a returning quarterback on a playoff team in a conference set up for him to win a lot of football games. So if that's how I'm judging this, I could see the argument for him being on this list for sure. Now, if he'd said top 10 returning quarterbacks, period, and we're talking about like draftability or something like that, I mean, maybe he doesn't, maybe he isn't worth being one of three quarterbacks mentioned. But I don't know. I mean, in terms of setup for success, I feel like he's got to be up there for that.
I'd still have Drew Allar over him. I'd probably have Cade over him too. I might look. I hate Miami. I might have Carson Beck over him. Like I know Beck wasn't very good this year, but like I don't know. Yeah. So if you're like considering their system and stuff, like who's going to put up a lot of yards,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he's high, but not
All right.
Ari, which he might have been. But I think Sam's a little high on this one. All right, number
Let's
nine.
go. Number 9, Jeremiah Love. I mean, I see this too, right? Had a great season at Notre Dame. They're returning a lot. and I think they are pretty dialed in on making another playoff run.
I think, yeah, I'm fine with this. Yeah, he's one of the top. I mean, obviously, with this list, he's the number one running back on this list.
The only running back on this.
Yeah, I guess I'm fine with that. Yeah, I don't know that I would definitively argue that somebody else is a better running back in college football right now going into next year. So yeah, this is a good one for me.
All right, 8, Arch Manning.
I think you're projecting a little bit here with Manning. I think he's incredibly talented. I think he's really, really good. I think to put him into the top 10 players in college football, you're projecting out that he's going to be really good. Which he probably will be really good.
Yeah.
But you're hoping he takes a bit of a step. I think this is kind of, to me, and I didn't pick Arby's brain when he did this, to me, some of the names on here are how you're kind of projecting them to play through the year. Like where they'll be at the end of the year. I think Arch is probably a top 5 quarterback in college football next year. I think he's the 8th best player in college football right now. I'd have a hard time saying that. Will he be by the end of the year? There's probably a pretty good chance. I don't know that I'd have him at 8, but I'm fine with this one. I don't think there's not a Cam Ward or a Shedeur Sanders right now that I'm putting all the eggs in on one basket. And so, yeah, Arch is fine in this top 10.
Number 7, they have Peter Woods, defensive tackle from Clemson.
Yeah, and then we can do these two together. Dylan Stewart also at South Carolina, so a couple of rivals back to back. I'm fine with this. I think these are both first-round draft picks. I think they were both incredibly talented, incredibly successful this year. I mean, shoot, even the next one, Colin Simmons, number 5 at Texas.
We Simmons in there too.
Yeah, they'll all be outside of some kind of crazy injury or something. They'll all be first-round draft picks. They're all incredibly talented, and they were all incredibly productive. I think they'll all be great this year.
All right. So the number 4 player on this list is wide receiver Ryan Smith out of Alabama, who obviously was Ryan Williams, excuse me, the youngest player in college football this season. I believe he was 17 for the vast majority of the season. Incredibly talented. Honestly, Alabama could have probably used him even more than they did. And he's got to come back, right? One of those guys who you're like, whew, you probably could go pro right away. Like, he's got to come back. So I don't have any issue with Ryan Williams right here.
Yeah, obviously, we're not giving anything away. Jeremiah Smith at number 1. So he's the number 2 wide receiver. I don't really care. Like, how do you rank a wide receiver versus an edge prospect? Like, to me, like, who cares? How do you really rank that? So yeah, he's the second best wide receiver in college football. I have no doubts about that. He was doing it with a terrible quarterback the entire year, which makes it maybe even more impressive. And so, yeah, he is to me, when I look at these, I kind of just break them down by like what positions are around them, because again, how do you rank a quarterback versus a wide receiver? So yeah, Ryan Williams, wide receiver 2, easily. This is one that made a lot of sense. Skip number 3 and then go to number 2.
Okay. Number 2, Caleb Downs, defensive back out of Ohio State.
He was it. Yeah. I think this is a little high. Okay. But again, I'm nitpicking because how do you compare a wide receiver with the defensive back with a quarterback? He probably is the best defensive back. He is so talented. Yeah. Obviously transferring over from Bama the year before. He is so good. And he made game-changing plays over and over and over again for that Ohio State defense, which didn't need any help being more talented than everyone else in the country. Adding him in the transfer portal last year was, I don't even think it was necessary because they still win the national championship without him. But adding him was just an embarrassment of riches add. And yeah, he's, to me, I think Ari hit on this. He is the best defensive back in the country. Certainly the best safety. I like Caleb Downs here. Again, 2 versus 8, who cares? But he's the best defensive back, so I'm good with him being on this list.
You already talked
Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, I was going to say, you already said Jeremiah Smith is number 1. So Ohio State, the number 1 offensive player, the number 1 defensive player returning.
What nice problem to have.
We don't know who their coordinators are going to be. That's a story for another moment, but they definitely have some talent. So your main issue, though, with this is the fact that number 3 is DJ Lagway. Obviously, the returning quarterback for Florida. He only became the starter when Graham Mertz got hurt. He's a true freshman. I don't have an issue with this. I think about who he's got returning around him. I think about the fact that he's going to have a top 5 offensive line that he's playing behind.
Elite offensive coordinator.
Do what?
Elite offensive coordinator that's calling the plays. I saw that laugh. No, okay.
Always looking to get me in trouble.
So I think DJ Lagway is the most talented. Okay, let me back up let me think through that real quick before I heap all the praise. My initial reaction was going to be to say that he's the most talented quarterback in college football. Like physically gifted, talented.
Yeah.
I want to be careful with that because I'm probably forgetting somebody that's like, oh shoot, like I just forgot. But like as far as like physical attributes and talent, like I this is not like a hate on Lagway thing. But if I was going to ask you before you saw this list, if I was going to ask you who's the best quarterback in college football, I know you're a homer. I don't know that you would have said DJ Lagway is the best quarterback in college football. You know, like so that's kind of I just think kind of like I said with Arch, you're projecting a ton here.
But
you're
here's
projecting
my thing.
him.
He's a top 5 odds for the Heisman. So is it shocking that somebody that's a top 5 odds for the Heisman is on the top 10 best players list that are returning?
When he's behind 3 other quarterbacks in that top 5 odds, it's a little bit surprising to me that Ari has him as his number 1 quarterback. Yes. Yeah. So to answer that question. So yeah, if I had come to you and said, is DJ Lagway the best quarterback in college football right now? I don't think you would have said yes to that.
Yeah.
Does he have the potential? I think he has every bit of potential. And I think unless Arch Manning comes back which I've heard some talk that like Arch could go pro after this 25 season, but that he will come back and play the 26 season as well, which is crazy to think about.
I mean, he's making millions of dollars.
Right.
Do it at Texas.
And really wants to win. So maybe if they win the national title, that changes. But like, I think Lagway has a great shot to be the number 1 or number 2 overall draft pick. So this is not me hating on him. I just don't think he's the best quarterback in college football right now. Like that's my only complaint with it. Kind of the same reason I have a problem putting Sam Levitt at number 10. I don't think he's the 3rd best quarterback in college football. I think you're projecting out. Like you're thinking, not you specifically, if you're Ari and you're putting this together, you're thinking that Lagway takes a massive step forward this year to not be good. He was good this year. There's no doubt about it. But to be elite, to be the best quarterback in college football. I think that's where I probably am like, that feels like a little bit of an overreach to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we shall see. 3 might be a little high. I'd put him on this top 10 list. I don't know that I'd put him 3, but I'd put him somewhere in the top 10.
I think that's fair. I think having him, I think that's a good compromise. I think that I don't know with Arch and DJ, I think you're projecting out for them to both take pretty big steps right now. Like I can't confidently say that either one of them are quarterback 1 or quarterback 2 at this moment. Yeah. I just think you need to see it. You need to see it for a full season. You need to see what they look like.
This is what we do in the off season, TJ. But that's not way too early. Top 10 college football.
And I guess you got to add some spice to it, right? You got to add some flavor to it.
Something to debate about.
But 3 seems high. I mean, he's the 3rd best player in college football right now. That's what Ari thinks anyway.
He's pretty good. That's what Ari thinks. I don't know if I'd put him 3, but like I said, I'd put him in the top 10. Okay, so let's talk about Oklahoma for a minute. All right. So we have talked about SEC coaches that are potentially on the hot seat this upcoming season. I think Venables is somebody that you and I both think the Oklahoma faithful are kind of chopping at the bit to see some improvement. Right? Like they're ready for Oklahoma to be Oklahoma. They want box suits Oklahoma. They want to see a run in the SEC. They want to see them make the playoffs. And I think the pressure is on. So Venables announced that he is going to be calling the defense for the 2025 season. Does this sound desperate to you?
I think we might disagree on this. Shocker.
Okay. Shocker.
But I actually don't hate this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think we've talked about this, and we've talked about this with different people. I think Dave was on your show and talked about this just the other day. To be a head coach and call plays on offense or defense, you have to be elite at it. And I do think that Brent Venables is an elite defensive coordinator.
100%.
And so I also don't think that defense is their problem. So that's not something that needs a mass. Their defense was really good. I know Alabama had their struggles, but they held Alabama to 3 points. They were really good defensively this year. If not for turnovers, they held Tennessee down. Like every big game they played in, with the exception of Texas, their defense was really good and graded out to be, I think, the best or the second best in the SEC. Don't quote me on that. But their defense was really, really good. And so this isn't like a massive change where a head coach is taking back over offensive play calling duties because their offense was bad for a year.
But
Or,
why take over defensive play calling duties if it wasn't an issue?
well, they lost they lost. Who did they
I
lose?
understand their previous D coordinator, obviously, but I don't. I mean,
I think if you don't have the confidence in somebody else to come in and
and run
continue
your
running your system the
system,
right way, you know that you can't. I think you know that you can't slip on defense. Like they need to
right?
not only improve the offense but keep the defense humming. So I actually don't hate this. Like he also knows that it comes down to this year. Like they've got to win 7-8 games for him to keep his job. And so
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, do I want my head coach calling plays on either side of the ball? Not really, like in
right.
today's football. But I don't hate it as much as maybe I thought I did when I first saw it. The more I thought about it, I don't dislike it that much. Because again, I think he is really, really elite. And I think it's about keeping a system together that did really good things last year, keeping that flowing the way that it is this year. Now, what you've seen as a Florida fan is you only have so many hours in a day, right?
Yeah.
And so where do other things start to slip at Oklahoma? Do penalties start to slip? Does special teams start to slip? Does recruiting start to slip? Like whatever, right? Like where are you allocating that time, that game film prep time in where are you taking that from? And what starts to slip around it? So that's the concern anytime this happens.
That you just catch everybody up watching from home. Zach Alley went to West Virginia, which is how Oklahoma kind of has this opening. But they had there have been all of these reports of different people that they were interviewing, right? The Arizona D coordinator, like they're just they were interviewing people. I don't love this decision, shockingly, and maybe that's because I have PTSD because I'm a Florida fan. But in general, it does not work for the head coach to be the head coach and the coordinator, offense or defense. It, in general, does not work. Now, does that mean that there's not instances where it does? Sure, there is exceptions to every rule, and I do think first and foremost for that formula to work, you must be an elite play caller, either on offense or defense, obviously, whatever your specialty is. So, and I do think that Brett Venables is that. I think he is an elite defensive coordinator. But exactly what you're saying is what I would be in fear of. Something has to give. When you, especially in the way that college football is right now, the head coach is not only the head coach, they're essentially the CEO as well, right? They handle so many more business aspects of college football that didn't exist 10 years ago. And that takes up your time. You're not getting extra hours in the day. It is, and so I find it hard to believe that something doesn't slip. It's Venables' system that, Allie was there, I think 1 year. So it's not like it's not Allie's system. It's Venables' system. And so I get that aspect of it. There won't be, there's no new learning of language. There's no, there's no new playbook. It's all been the same regardless of who was calling the defense. But it's just the responsibility of calling the defense. And I don't know. And I feel like I get the concept, though, of head coaches feeling the need to bet on themselves in a year where they may be on the hot seat. And I can understand. I think this is the same thing that Billy Napier has gone through at Florida, where it's one of those things that's like, well, if I'm going down and we're going down my way, I'm going to bet on myself because I'm the person that's losing this job. So am I in a year where I could get canned? Does it make sense for me to teach somebody else how to run the system I want run? I can see that argument. I don't know. I just think something's bound to slip.
For that same reason, I mean, and again, I'm stealing from Dave again, but like, I don't even hate it as much as I thought I did. Like, I don't hate it as much from Napier's perspective this year as I did last year. Now, hate is a funny word because obviously I want Florida to do poorly, but like, just looking at it, rivalry aside, just thinking like what's best for a program. Like, I hated it last year more than I hated it this year. But we all last year, and Napier included, thought that was his make or break year. And I mean, it was, right? Like if they had gone 4-8, they would have fired him. But like, I think that this year with Lagway,
it probably is, right? Like, but it's the same system. It's just a generational quarterback. And
he's got his quarterback. And again, if the ship's going down, I'm steering it. Like I am the one that's going to determine whether this thing works or not. Yeah. So like I know Florida fans are not thrilled with it, but to me, I mean, he's got such a large staff. They're hiring all these guys to work like the off-field stuff, like some of the NIL stuff, like the GMs and this, that, and the other. There should be enough support around him to where this makes sense.
Yeah.
To me, it's not. I don't even know if it's like that Napier's letting other stuff slip, as opposed to. I mean, he's missed on some hires, if we can just be very frank. Like, it's not just that his offense, like he can't call plays, because I think the offense has been, the brighter of the two spots in his 3 years there. It's the fact that their strength and conditioning wasn't good when they started. They didn't have the focus on special teams when they started. Like they've gone through defensive coordinators now. And so I think there are pros and cons to everything that's happened, but I don't know. Like, I don't hate the Napier one. I like the Venables. I like Venables calling plays a little more than Napier. Because Venables is certainly more elite.
Well, here's the other thing. That's what we said. Step one, to even consider doing both, you must be an elite play caller.
Right.
I do not believe that there is a single person that would call Billy Napier an elite play caller.
Yeah, just good.
That doesn't mean he wasn't a great play caller or very good play caller or whatever. But elite is something like, I would say there's probably 5 elite play callers on either side of the ball in college football that I would allow the term elite to be used for, right? It's just, it's the very select few. It's the 1% of 1%. So I don't know. I don't think that that's his strong suit. Let's not even get on the Florida topic, but I'll be interested to see how this works out, because I would not advise this.
So, I mean, listen, for every Billy Napier that there is, that sounds like such a bad shot. There is a Steve Sarkisian. There is somewhere in the SEC.
I think Steve Sarkisian cost Texas, at least in the SEC championship, by being the play caller, and that's something that is an elite play caller that has had issues,
but got him there.
I mean, I guess. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how many games each SEC team faces against top 25 competition moving forward, or top 25 national championship odds for the 2025 season. I thought this was really, really interesting. I saw it on Twitter. The team with the very most is 9. The team with the least is 4. But let's just kind of run down this conference. So Tennessee sees 4 teams that have top 25 national championship odds. Texas has 5. Ole Miss has 5, Missouri has 5, Auburn has 5. Georgia plays 6. Vandy, Texas A&M, South Carolina, and LSU all face 7. Mississippi State, Kentucky, Arkansas, Alabama, and Florida all face 8 teams with top 25 odds in the for national championship odds. That's freaking wild. And then Oklahoma sits at the top of this list with 9. How do we have these schedules set up so there's a team that faces 9 and teams that face 4?
I don't have a great answer for that. Some of it has to do with out-of-conference scheduling. I'll say that.
Okay,
and to be somewhat fair to this, so on Florida's 8, Miami and Florida State are included in that 8. So it is daunting, and Florida State was terrible last year and went 2-10. But Florida State has top 25 national championship odds right now. So maybe this isn't as. I mean, you think about it. You think about the teams that are going to have top 25 odds. They're going to be the top 2 or 3 from the smaller conferences, and the top 8 or so from the larger conferences. And so I think out of conference scheduling,
football schedule here, because they only have 4. So let's see who they play. So they open with Syracuse. Then they play.
They play same thing they did last year. Alabama, Georgia.
I believe Georgia, UAB. They play Georgia, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Alabama. You've got to think Alabama. They have Kentucky, Oklahoma, Florida, Vanderbilt, and then New Mexico State. So I guess out of that, you're talking Florida, Oklahoma, Kentucky, and Alabama probably.
Right. So not all. I'll say this. What would be maybe more interesting on this is looking at those top 25 odds opponents, because Tennessee's counting Oklahoma on theirs, and Florida's counting Florida State on theirs. And we both know that Florida State and Oklahoma aren't. Now, that still just makes it 7-3. That doesn't make it that much better. But I do think it brings some of the
So I've
Holy
got
crap, nice
Oklahoma,
stats.
which is sitting at the top with 9. They do they play Illinois State, which is obviously not one of their 9. Then they play Michigan, which
They're in
is
there,
one
yeah.
of their 9. They play Temple. I'm guessing Temple is not.
And even Michigan, we mentioned Michigan, and that is a tough game, not to gloss over it. That is a tough game, but Michigan's not winning the national championship this
No.
year. Like, we're all aware of that. And so,
No,
like,
but I mean, you could
these are-
say if the top 25 odds for the national championship are, you could call that a very early top 25 poll,
Yeah,
right? Because that's
kinda, yeah.
what you're saying. I mean, essentially,
so you're putting FSU in your top 25.
I mean, I'm not. Whoever wrote this stupid list is, but so Vegas. The point is, though, 9 teams on your schedule being in theory a top 25 versus 4 is crazy. They play Auburn, they play Kent State, then they've got Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, LSU.
Every single one of their SEC opponents are top 25.
Yeah, nobody did. Schedulers did not do Oklahoma the same type of favors they did Texas.
Yeah, no, and then you look at it like Tennessee. I mean, what you get some takeaways from this? Tennessee has to be playoffs or bust yet again. Like Tennessee's only 3. Now they play Syracuse, who won 10 games last year. So we'll see if Syracuse can be good again 2 years in a row. I really like Fran Brown coming from Georgia and going up there. So we'll see. But Tennessee's 3 games this year are Florida in the Swamp, Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and Georgia at home.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Those are their 3 games. If they lose anything else, I think it's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And they just honestly, what do they need? They need to go 1-2 in those games.
Well, and they've got Nico in year 3. I mean, there's.
But the other end of it is Oklahoma. Like Brent Venables, I mean, we just talked about him taking over the DC job. Like that's really tough. Like there's a good chance he gets fired after this year if they have to play 9 teams that are in the top 25.
I just looked, and Florida's actually their 8 teams are in the top 21 too. Which
Florida.
Somebody smoked crack and then put FSU in that list, but
I mean, their odds are good because of the conference they play.
Yeah, that is true. That is very true.
But yeah, I mean, but I think this is what you're going to get. Like, you're just going to have years where you know,
but
where
we have to do something about, and I'm talking about this conference, right? Like you gotta fix your own conference before you worry about outside of this, but we have got to do a better job scheduling in the future. At this point, we're only doing 2 years at a time, right? So it's not like it used to be when you're scheduling 10 years ahead of time and, you put, Florida State and Miami and UCF on the schedule and you didn't know they were all 3 going to be good, or you did know all 3 were going to be good because they were when you booked them, but they aren't now. Like, it's not like that. When the SEC is only doing 2 years at a time, you've got to do a little bit better job with parity in scheduling. And I mean, I have this gripe overall with college football as well, but it's a lot harder to fix when there isn't parity between conferences. But the SEC as a whole could have done a lot better than they did this go round.
I think yes and no. I think there are some aspects of it that, like, you really don't know. Like, 2 year with how year-to-year college football is, a team can make a massive jump or massive fall in 2 years. Like, nobody would have predicted Kentucky off of back-to-back 10-win seasons was going to be the worst team in the SEC this year, right? Like that.
I mean, Kentucky's even on this freaking list, though.
No, but what I'm saying is Kentucky was an easy game for a lot of people last year, but we wouldn't have thought it was going to be an easy game. Missouri.
Yeah, but Vanderbilt ended up being a much tougher game.
Correct. Yeah, like, so you do get some of that nuance in it, right? Yeah. I think people thought Oklahoma would be slightly better than as awful as they are.
I'll give you an example. We talked about this past offseason a lot. We could have looked at Missouri's schedule and said they will sleepwalk to 10 wins, which they essentially did, right? And we could see that the moment the schedule came out because of how it was set up. So that's the kind of thing you can avoid. Like, I want to look at an SEC schedule and say, all right, well, I know what's going to happen in 5 of these, but I don't know the other 4. And that is when we have schedules like Missouri's, that isn't the case.
I think, so maybe you won't like this. I think the only way to truly do that would be to get rid of the rivalry games that are standard every year. And that's just not something that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because, Ole Miss is always going to get the worst team in the conference when they play Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And Florida's always going to get the best team in the conference when they play Georgia. Like, there's just no getting around that, right? So, like, you're immediately starting out. And, I mean, it's even worse for Tennessee. They have natural rivalries with Alabama and Georgia every single year, and that's not changing. And This year, these last 2 years, they
I
played
mean, and
Oklahoma.
Florida, they have Florida on there every year. I would be shocked if Florida Tennessee goes away.
Right. Because what happens? Okay. So these
Florida
last 2
LSU
years,
probably doesn't go away. Florida Georgia doesn't go away, and Florida Tennessee doesn't go away, which means Florida's probably playing all three of those teams every single year.
but how about for Tennessee? These last 2 years, they played, last year and this year, they played Oklahoma. If their natural rivalries with Georgia and Alabama stay, they're going to play Georgia, Alabama, and Texas in 2026.
Yeah.
Like, that's ridiculous, And so Tennessee gets the light load this year, but it ain't going to be like that for long.
We got Georgia, Texas, and LSU this year. That's not any.
I mean, I put LSU behind Alabama for sure.
I don't know. LSU I don't know. LSU has been historically good for a very long time, and they've won multiple national titles in the last 20 years.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put them on Alabama's level.
But Alabama today, Alabama now.
I mean, they blew LSU out this year in Death Valley with a bad quarterback. I think that's kind of like the Michigan-Ohio State thing, where like LSU just can't. Like, it's just mental. They just, like Tennessee playing in the swamp. Like, they just can't do it. Like, it doesn't matter. Florida could play that game and be 4-7 at that point, and they're going to beat them. And Tennessee could be 10-2. Like,
they've had so many good back and forth games.
Who, LSU and Bama?
LSU and Bama, yeah.
I think
was the perennial game in October.
How many times has LSU won in like the last 10?
I don't know. I would have to look that up, but
it ain't many.
That's
twice in the last 10.
Is that what you pulled up? I was like, I don't have.
No, I'm not that fast.
Okay.
57 and 27 overall, and in the last 10, they've won 2. So since 2012, they've won 2 of them. But I will say before that, like back in the heyday, like it was more fun.
Back in my heyday, yeah.
Yeah, back when
I would watch that game before going out on University Avenue every year.
I do think it's interesting. Sometimes we see, and then it's kind of the same thing. Who would have thought that South Carolina would be this good too?
Yeah.
Right. South Carolina gets added to a lot of schedules and is tougher. So yeah, there's some surprises and stuff, but
yeah. Very interesting for sure. It'll give us lots to pay attention to and focus on this off season. It's kind of fun. Maybe we'll come up with our own rankings, as this go on scheduling wise and stuff. We'll have lots of free time this off season. So who has the easiest, who has the hardest, we'll go from there. But okay. So before we get out of here, there is one other thing I want to talk to you about. So Chip Kelly leaving for the NFL. So this means that Ohio State has lost their offensive and defensive coordinator coming off a national title. Obviously, their DC split for Penn State, which is probably far more surprising than Chip Kelly leaving to be an OC in the NFL, which, we think is where he really ultimately wants to be, right? So I don't know that that's overly surprising, but that's a pretty big hit for a national championship team, huh?
Yeah, they also lost Justin Fry, their offensive line coach, which their offensive line was really, really good in moving some stuff around after a few injuries. And I think their offensive line will be fine. But yeah, having to replace the entire system on both sides of the ball is tough. Now, we just mentioned with Venables, like Ryan Day is an offensive guy, and I don't know that he takes it over.
Ryan Day had, I want to say it was the 46th ranked offense 2 seasons ago, the last time he called plays. They had the number 3 offense this year with Chip Kelly calling plays. Now, I don't know a whole lot about what Chip Kelly came in and changed. Like, it very well may be just Ryan Day's system, but Chip Kelly was calling it. And
I think
Ryan
Day
was
instrumental in it. And, having the best player in college football didn't
helps. But I think Ryan Day is an elite play caller. But I think this is a perfect example of why having an offensive coordinator, even if you're an elite play caller, gets you over that hump, right? It's not going to, you can win 10 games all year, for a decade with Ryan Day calling plays. But he couldn't get over that hump to get a national title as he was the head coach calling plays. And listen, this is the guy that won national titles as an offensive coordinator calling plays. So, clearly he is elite at that. But it's too many hats for one person.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if he took it back over. I think he'll make a hire.
I'd be pretty surprised if any of Ohio State faithful were to let him take it back over. Like, I think they're like, no. Did you see what you just did? No.
They've forgiven him. They've forgiven him some, but not completely.
Not enough for that to happen. For sure.
No, I'd be pretty surprised if he wasn't the guy calling it. But at the end of the day, like, just the thought of having to replace your quarterback, all the talent.
Right? Like, I can tell, like, at Florida, when they won their national title, I want to say it was in 2008, Dan Mullen and Charlie Strong both left. Dan Mullen left to become the head coach at Mississippi State. Charlie Strong left to become the head coach at Texas. And so it's not necessarily unheard of, but it is interesting that Ohio State's DC goes to Penn State for a lateral move, right? Like, probably more money, but he probably could have leveraged that and gotten that same amount of money out of Ohio State. He didn't. So there's something going on there. Either he and Day butt heads.
Yeah, there's some relationship stuff for sure.
Yeah, and other parts of his stuff. And then same thing, Chip Kelly. Now, if the NFL is the ultimate goal, I do understand the move, right? And Kelly had spent time in the NFL before, came back into college football when that didn't work out. So I understand wanting another go at the NFL. He's probably not making more money in the NFL as an OC as he was at Ohio State. He probably could have leveraged the NFL offer to make even more money at Ohio State if he wanted to. And he wasn't leaving to be a head coach anywhere. So both of them are interesting.
I will correct one thing. Kelly, yeah, he's going to make a ton of money in the NFL. They're talking like $6 million a year. So yeah, he is making.
What was he making?
Crap tons more.
Was he making like $3 million at Ohio State?
Chip Kelly contract. We'll see what AI tells me quickly. Chip Kelly's salary at Ohio State 4.8.
Okay.
So yeah, like a $1.2 million raise.
Let's say if he's making 4.8, let's say he was offered 6. You don't think he could get 6 if he was at 4.8 if they wanted him to stay having just won a national title? I bet he could.
Maybe. God, could you imagine $6 million in college football?
Wild. That's more than most head coaches are making.
$6 million in the NFL is absurd.
It is absurd.
Like $6 million in the NFL.
Really that or not? Is that what has been reported? He's getting is $6 million.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I Googled really quickly and it came up. Yeah. That's absurd. That's
4.8 as a coordinator is also absurd.
But not having to deal with these idiot recruits, not having to deal with these idiot recruits' parents and handlers and NIL and everything else.
Yeah. They're going to the
and
NFL.
$1.5 million pay bump or $1.2 million pay bump. Like,
yeah.
But like, this is what happens. And this is what, I talked to Zach Smith about this last week. This is what made Saban so great is that this happened to him every other year. Mm-hmm. They'd win a title and both coordinators would leave.
Yeah.
And guess what he'd do? He'd find the next best out there. Yeah. And so, the most impressive thing that Saban did to me was not, the national titles, right? Like, but it was keeping staffs together. It's not the recruiting. The titles are up there, but it's, the titles are just a symptom of everything else that happened. It's the fact that he was able to keep staffs together, or not keep staffs together, continuously replace staffs. Like Bobby had
both on the field and in the offices.
Yeah, Bobby had Mickey Andrews, and Mickey Andrews was never wanted to be a head coach, and so he was there for 20 plus years. Yep. And so it was just you're just there every year. You don't care. You're not leaving. You can win 5 in a row, and you don't care. You're just going to keep staying there. That's just obviously not college football today. No. And that's what made Nick so great. And we've even seen like a small sliver of it with Kirby. Like, they hate their offensive coordinator now, right? Like they hate Mike Bobo. And so
they hated Bobo when he was the offensive coordinator for Richt.
Yeah. So it's hard to hire elite after elite after elite after elite. And so we'll see. Ryan Day's got a tough job ahead of him. Their national championship odds didn't take a dip or anything. Like their talent is still ridiculous. So
and their talent and having just won a national title and their propensity for spending will make the list long of people willing to line up to interview. But
no doubt.
Still interesting to talk about for sure. Probably not something Ryan Day thought he was going to have to be replacing,
both of them. Yeah.
Right away, right now. But it is what it is. All right, guys, we so appreciate you hanging out with us tonight, whether you watch this live or you're watching these back later on. We appreciate the support. Do us a favor. Make sure that you are subscribed to A Peek Inside SEC Football. It takes 2 seconds. It's free, and it's the easiest way to show support as we continue to grow this channel. we'll have lots more interesting stuff. We got a cool interview coming up, and we'll be back soon to talk to you guys.